Okay, so the recording has started. And we should see attendees coming in. Yes, very, very good. Okay. I'll just give it a minute, Laura, while people are flooding in.
No worries.
Meantime, I should share my screen. Okay, so I think we'll make a start. So my name is Thomas Newman. I'm the founder of Viva Financial Tuition. Good morning to you all, or well, maybe it's not morning where you're joining from, because we do have a very diverse student group in terms of location. So I'm delighted that you're joining today's webinar with Laura Winkworth, who's going to be your tutor for the February 2024 SCS. And I'm gate crashing Laura's party this morning, just very, very briefly. So Laura's going to talk you through some of the key points for the SCS for February 2024. But before she starts, I would like to talk you through some of Viva Financial Tuition's course options for February. So maybe you're considering taking a course. I think that's a very, very good idea. We have some very good ones, I think. And we've got a couple of options, I think, that would be of interest to those of you who are considering taking a course. So I'll pass this link on to you after the webinar. It's an overview of the different options we have for the strategic case study. So we've been doing this for about 7 years. Viva has been, teaching CIMA right across the 12 professional exams for 7 years, as I said. In that time, I would say we've really become known for the case studies. So they're really our area of expertise, I would say, thanks to tutors like Laura. So here are the options. Also worth mentioning, by the way, lots of prizes here. We were recently given the CIMA Global Pass Rate Excellence Award for 2023. So we're very, very proud of that. Basically, it means that students who've been taking courses with us in that period have exceeded the global average pass rates. So very, very pleased with that. If you want to go to Trustpilot, which is a third-party rating website, you can check out our user scores, very, very high, 4.9 out of 5. So you can read comments from past students, etc., who've taken courses with us. In general, the consensus is that they were very, very pleased with the courses that they took. So as I said, I'll pass this link to you after the webinar. You can read through the different course features. I think it's a really complete course. There's a mix of recorded content, and depending on the course option you take, there would also be live sessions with Laura for this February window. But there's a big bank of recorded materials there. They're on-demand video lectures covering the pre-scene, the industry analysis. There's a series of videos as well on the main theories from E3, F3, and P3 as they apply to the case study. There's a key issues recording as well with the top 10 issues relating to this case. We have 5 mock exams with model solutions. Depending on the course option you take, they would come with marking. If you go for the elite course option, which I'll talk about in a minute. And speaking of the elite course here, the additional features you would get if you go for the elite course, there are live exam workshops, very exam focused workshops with Laura. They're 2 hours each. There are 6 of those, including lots of mock exam debriefs, walking you through the mock exams, the solutions, etc. You'd have a lot of contact with Laura if you opt for the elite course. So there's a private community area where you would interact with Laura and indeed with your fellow students, which is very, very useful. There's marking included with the elite course as well, and there's a pass guarantee so that if you fail this exam, you would get free access to the May 2024 elite course free of charge. Okay, so there's more detail basically on those features, which you can read maybe in your own time when I pass this link to you. We go into detail on the features there, but very, very complete course. I'll let Laura, introduce herself after I've finished. But basically, she is a fantastic tutor, and she's been doing this now with Viva for a few years. Laura, when was it that that you started?
I think it's about 3 years now.
Yeah, it could be 3.
I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
gone quite quickly. I'm sure it was everything by reference to COVID, but I think it was
yeah.
pre-COVID.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's
That's
been
like,
quite some time. It has, it
mhm.
has. But in that time, we've had a number of world prize winners, and actually it's becoming more and more frequent, I would say. It seems
Mm.
at this rate that we've got someone on the prize winning list for every exam window that we do. So that's in large part due to Laura's teaching, which, as I said, is just excellent. So you're in safe hands, basically.
Yeah, we've had 2 world number 1s, I think, in those
Oh,
three years, and a
at
world
least,
number 3, haven't we, as well as some
yeah,
UK prize winners.
yeah,
So
that's it.
it shows the course works, I think.
I think it does. I think it does. So the two options that we have really for the SCS course, there's a standard option, and then there's what we call an elite option. So the elite is more complete. It's more personalized. It's a very, very in-depth course. The standard is also a very good option. So if you're looking for something that is maybe you want to go through it in your own time, there isn't the live course element included in the standard course. But it's very, very complete, as I said. So there are lots of on-demand lectures covering the pre-scene analysis, the industry analysis, those applied theory sessions, as I said. And you do get mock exams. You get 5 of them. You get solutions, but you do not get marking, okay? So that's the standard option. That's £299. Then you have the elite course option, which includes everything in the standard course, but it includes all of these other elements. So there are live interactive workshops with Laura. There's 6 of those for this February window. So they're 2 hours each, so 12 hours of live workshops in total. All of the 5 mock exams that you do are marked as well. So you get personalized feedback on all 5 mock exams, talking you through your strengths, your weaknesses, giving you a score, a breakdown of scores across the different areas of the exam, etc. So that's worth its weight in gold. As I said, you have a lot of interaction with Laura throughout the case, so there's a private community area where you can talk with her and your fellow students. And the sessions that Laura's doing include mock debriefs, exam techniques, time management on the day of the exam, etc. So really, really useful. And as I said, if you opt for the elite course, there's also a pass guarantee, so that if you do fail the exam, you're covered and have free access to the next course for May, free of charge. Okay, so that's 799. So we recognize that is a significant amount of money, but it's really still value for money, I think, when you compare it to other course options on the market. So courses like this, the elite course option, typically they're priced at in excess of £1,000, and sometimes even much higher than that. But due to Viva's setup, the fact that we're online entirely, we're a remote organization, we have been for the last 7 years, it allows us to make savings perhaps that some of the other traditional tuition providers don't have. So we're able to pass on then a lower price to our students. Also worth mentioning that if you go for the elite course option, there are 2 payment options. You can either pay the $799 up front, or you can choose to spread payments out over 8 months. So if you opt for the installment arrangement, you would pay £99 now. That will give you access to the course, and the remaining £800 will be paid off over 8 months. So the fee is a little bit higher if you opt for the installment arrangement, but it gives you flexibility. It gives you the ability to spread payments out over a number of months. Okay. So there's a little bit more on the page, student reviews, etc. if you want to dig into those, and there's a lot more detail on the individual course features that we have there. So you can go through those in your own time. So I'll pass this link on to you. We'll send it via email. We'll also send it through the chat function in Zoom here after I drop off. And just trying to think if there's anything else. This is being recorded, this session. So we'll share it with you tomorrow, so that you can watch it back. And this is a free to attend session. So please feel free to send it on to anyone that you know who's thinking about taking the SCS exam for this window. And I think that's it. Yeah, one more thing. So if you have any questions about when live classes, etc., are taking place, please send us an email to info@vivatuition.com. I know that there are some people probably attending today who are taking the elite course option, have already paid for that. Tomorrow, we'll be sending out all of the different links that you need to get on the live sessions, etc. So I think the first live workshop will be next Thursday, Laura, is that correct?
Thursday evening.
Yeah. Okay, so basically tomorrow, a member of the Viva team will be sending all of those out to you if you're taking the elite course, okay? And that's it from me. So I'll hang around for a little bit. Feel free to drop messages, etc., into the chat box of the Q&A, and I'll do my very best to get back to all of them. And that's it. Over to you, Laura. Enjoy the session, everyone, and best of luck, Laura.
Thank you. Thomas, we had a wee flag to say that my microphone wasn't so good, so I have switched it. And can you hear me well?
Yes.
So thank you very much for someone for flagging that up, because that wouldn't be ideal. And then you just need to make me host so that we can share the screen.
I do indeed, yeah. Hold on a second.
So now I am the host. So if I go and share my screen, then, and I will pop it on display. There. So hopefully, and you can tell me if this is not the case, you can see our slide presentation entitled Mastering February 24 Strategic Case Study. So hopefully that's all good. If someone could just give me a little thumbs up or yes, I can see it, that would be fantastic from my point of view.
I can see it.
Excellent. So what I am going to do with you is, firstly, I will introduce myself, and then I will probably turn my camera off and we will focus on the slides and I will chat us through the slides. What we're going to cover is a little bit of a taster of the pre-scene. Now, we don't go into a lot of detail because you will have the detailed content in the webinars from November 23. So it is the same pre-scene that we use for November 23 and the February 24 sitting. And I think this gives you a little bit of an advantage when it comes to the February 24 sitting. What happens in the November sitting is we space out those webinars and you have the pre-scene content, industry analysis. We've got my favorite, the applied series, where we look at P3, E3 and F3 series, but we look at them applied to the pre-scene. We talk through exam standard questions and breaking them down and technique in those webinars. And then we have a final webinar where we bring everything all together as a key issue. So if you were on the November course, then you are having that knowledge, but as those webinars are going out live. What you will have for February is you can choose to access those on demand. So if you're someone who wants to listen to all of those at once, then you can do those. They are available for you right away. If you're someone who prefers to space them out and maybe follow the suggested program that Thomas was showing on the website, then you can do that. So you have more choice really in the February sitting. But to make sure that we still get that live webinar aspect, where no matter what course you've signed up to, that we can all get together and we can ask questions and things like that. There will also be a mid-course check-in and an end-of-course check-in. Those ones will be live and they will be more open format, so you can come along with any questions that you have got. I'm always a wee bit nervous. We pop those questions up on the screen, whether they be about the pre-scene, technical questions, whether they be about exam technique, anything that you want to ask. There will be opportunity, no matter what course you sign up for, to have that mid-course and then at the end of the course as well. So I'm going to run through the slides today. Like I said, a little bit about the pre-scene. I'll give you a little bit of a flavour for some of the key theories that you need to be working on, and then a little bit of advice in terms of making a plan and getting yourself ready for studying and having a successful strategic case study exam day. And then after I have run through the slide presentation, I tend to pop my video camera back on, and then it's just a little bit of an open forum, so you can ask questions in the chat box or in the Q&A on that side. As Thomas said, if there are questions about course pricing, payment structure, anything administrative, you're best to ask those of Viva. So I think Thomas is hanging around for a wee bit now, or you can do them at the info@vivatuition.com email. Anything else to do with the pre-scene, preparing yourself, technical content, how to plan, how to study, then I can cover that at the end. So that's how we like to do it. So as I run through, obviously you can post any questions, but I won't be looking at those until the end of the session. So that's how we run it. Okay, so let's get rid of me up there, and we will focus on our slide presentation and taking us through. So welcome officially now to the Mastering the February 24 Strategic Case Study with Viva Financial Tuition. Let's take a little look at the agenda that we have for this morning. So first up, we're going to run through some key pre-scene information. So this is very much a taster, and then you can drill down and have a look at a very detailed overview in the 2 pre-scene webinars that will be available. Then we're going to have a look at some key theories. We're going to have a look at those from each of our 3 pillars. So we will have a look at P3, E3 and F3. Again, just a high-level overview and give you a taster of what you can see in more detail in the 3 applied series webinars. And then I imagine at this stage you were thinking, well, what is the best approach for strategic case study? It does take a lot of time and commitment, but if we have a focused action plan, then my aim is that everyone studying on a Viva course is maximizing every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes that they can spare for strategic case study. I do find at this stage, you know, you've got full-time jobs, you have a lot more responsibility at work, you've probably got a lot more responsibility in your personal life than when you started your CIMA journey. So we do need to come up with a really efficient and effective action plan. So we give you lots of hints and tips. And then at the end, as I said, we'll pop the camera back on and we can have a more informal Q&A and see if you have any questions. So let's start off by having a look at some key pre-scene information. Now, as I said, the detailed breakdown of the pre-scene is covered in 2 pre-scene webinars, and that's round about 4 hours of detailed content. In the first webinar, we have a look at the industry in a lot of detail, and understanding the industry is really important. We can't understand the latter half of the pre-scene, which is more about our company, unless we understand the industry. We wouldn't have the context. And again, knowledge of the pre-scene and that application of industry-specific knowledge is one of the things that we say is key, and the examiner says is key to success. So let's have a look at a company overview now. Now, the company that we will be focusing on for this case study sitting is Robo Bryce. So Robo Bryce, essentially, we are going to be a senior finance manager in Robo Bryce for the next 5 to 6 weeks, taking us up to exam day. So let's take a look at what Robo Bryce does. It creates solutions for handling objects, primarily in warehouses and factories. So what does that mean? Essentially, it is a manufacturing business. So it designs and manufactures equipment that is used in large warehouses. Now, that can range from the low-tech side of things, such as shelving units, up to, as you see in the picture here, advanced robotics that are helping within that warehouse processing system. So where is Robo Bryce located? We are based in the fictional country of Tesland, and the currency that we are using in Tesland is the $. Robo Bryce is a relatively well-established company. It was established in 1952 and it listed on the Tesla Stock Exchange in 1971. I have to say, I'm always really pleased when I look at the pre-scene document when the company is listed, because it makes the testing of certain subjects a lot easier. So for example, corporate governance, we have a lot more clarity with regard to what stakeholders and shareholders require from a corporate governance point of view if the business is listed. It also opens up a lot more financing opportunities, such as being able to do share-for-share exchanges or rights issue for our shares, etc. So personally, I prefer it when the pre-scene focuses on a listed business. Now, let's think about the complexity within our business, and Robo Bryce is a fairly complex operation. Not only does it offer a wide product selection, which I'll pick up on the next slide in a wee bit more detail, but it also does business in many different countries. We will see shortly that it is located, its warehouses are manufacturing sites are located in 2 jurisdictions, Teslin and Darland, but also it has global operations. So I infer from that that is global customers and potentially as well global suppliers. This opens up the opportunity for our examiner to test us on political risk. So different governments in different countries and jurisdictions will impact us, and also foreign exchange risk. So we will cover those in detail in the course as well. Now, continuing with that complexity, as I said, we have 2 production facilities. We have one in Darland, so that is our overseas production facility, and one in Teslin. Darland essentially focuses on more of the low-tech solutions like shelving, forklift trucks, things like that. And Teslin is the one that is focusing more on the innovative products, such as our autonomous robots. Again, we'll pick up on those in a little bit more detail. Now, one thing I like to step back and have a look at initially is get a feel for Robo Bryce. What would we say is Robo Bryce's unique selling point? What is its market positioning? And I think a theme that we see through the pre-scene is that Robo Bryce has been successful, and it has grown really because it's taken an innovative approach to product development. So overall, I would say Robo Bryce is a differentiator, and we'll have a little look at how they do that. If I was to look for another differentiating factor or unique selling point, again, I would say I get the theme through the pre-scene that they're very much focused on the customer. They have business advisors who work closely with their customers and design bespoke and innovative solutions for them. So again, very much a differentiator in my view. So that's our overview, and now let's take a little look at the products on offer. So as I said, when we're looking at products, we have 2 locations where these are produced, both in Teslin and in Darland. So having a look at the Teslin factory, this is our home location. And within the Teslin factory, we're focusing on those automated and more innovative products. These include carousels and robotics. There's a lot of detail in the pre-scene, and I will elaborate on this in the pre-scene webinars, bringing in some real-world examples that will enhance your understanding. Also makes your study a lot more interesting if you look at some real-world examples as well. But let's take a brief overview here. Now, carousels are split into horizontal carousels and vertical carousels. When we look at the horizontal carousels, as it says here, these are used for storage, but they also deliver the inventory in bins or in cartons to the pickers, the human pickers who are putting together orders for their customers. And horizontal carousels, again, I would encourage you to have a look at some videos of this on YouTube or on TikTok or on real-life competitor websites. For example, you might want to look at Honeywell or Grey Orange, for example. Have a look at those. And essentially, they, as well as storage, they save the pickers a lot of time and energy by bringing the goods direct to the pickers. Then we also have vertical carousels. Again, these are used to store and retrieve goods. They bring them direct to the pickers. However, they tend to do this on shelves. And the big advantage of a vertical carousel is that they can make maximum maximum efficiency from warehouse capacity. And how they do this is the vertical carousels work from the high ceiling, the floor, all the way down to the ceiling. And again, I would encourage you to go onto YouTube, etc., and have a look at some real world examples. It just brings the whole thing to life. What you need to know is some of the advantages and disadvantages to both horizontal and vertical carousels. And again, we cover this in detail in the pre-scene webinar. Now, as well as manufacturing these automated carousels, the Tesla factory also focuses on mobile robots. Again, I would strongly encourage you to watch videos of these robotics in action. I do refer to various different examples in the pre-scene webinar, and I find them really, really interesting. I think in one of the pre-scene webinars, I'd had a look at cobots, which is a robotic colleague that would work alongside human warehouse operatives. And certainly I think having a cobot in my own life and in my own home would be very, very helpful. Now, you'll see throughout the pre-scene, there's various different acronyms, and you need to be aware of these because you might see them in your exam day scenario. So you need to understand what they mean. Remember, you are a senior finance manager working in Robo Bryce. They will expect you to know what these acronyms stand for and what they mean. So we have our AMRs. They are our autonomous mobile robots. Now, they are a little less sophisticated. They will move around a warehouse, but typically do so by moving on tracks, or they will scan barcodes as they move around the warehouse that tells them where to go. The more sophisticated ones are the automated guided vehicles, the AGVs. Oh no, I've got that the wrong way around. Oh, sorry about that. The AMRs, beg your pardon about for that, the autonomous mobile robots, they are the ones that are the most sophisticated. They have their onboard software. They can be driven and programmed by AI to make those optimal decisions. And with that onboard intelligence, obviously that brings loads and loads of opportunity for Robo Bryce's customers. One of the things I would strongly encourage you to do is have a little look at the type of companies that would be Robo Bryce's customers. So things like third-party logistics companies, think Amazon warehouses, think DHL, think UPS. And again, I do cover these on the pre-scene webinars. What is important to those customers is to have the throughput through the warehouse as efficient as possible. Storing things in a warehouse is expensive. And if we think about those logistics companies, what they want to deliver to their customers, which could include you and I as endpoint customers, is accurate delivery times and fast delivery. And this onboard intelligence in our AMRs, the use of data, the use of algorithms to optimize the situation can really deliver value to Robo Bryce's customers and deliver value to their customers. So that, again, is a key thing in the warehouse. And then our automated guided vehicles, beg your pardon for getting my acronyms mixed up there, they are the ones that go on rails. They are the ones that scan barcodes. Again, the advantage of the AGVs is they are reducing human time, human walking time. They are stronger, they are faster, but they will not have the advantage of that onboard intelligence. They are more centrally controlled, or for example, they will go on rails. So the Tesla factory is more of the cutting edge products. And when you have a little look at the pre-scene, you will see that the Tesla factory itself is also automated. So Robo Bryce have invested in industrial high-tech robotics and machinery in order to produce the carousels and the robots as well. Now, moving on to the more low-tech side of things in the Darlin factory. So the Darlin factory is an overseas location. But just because we're going to look at some low-tech products that we offer, please don't assume that the Darland factory is not worth anything. Yeah, certainly a potential exam day scenario is that we might sell Darland, but we don't want to underestimate the value that the Darland factory brings to Robo Bryce. So let's have a look at the products. So we have forklift trucks to start off with. So I'm assuming everybody knows what a forklift truck is. It can be used to lift pallets, maybe from a lorry or a delivery van, and then move them to a storage location within the warehouse. Forklift trucks can also be used then to retrieve from the storage location and bring it to the pickers. Now, again, if we think about Robo Bryce's customers, one of the things that they want to do is optimize warehouse space. We've already talked about that with the use of vertical carousels. However, forklift trucks can also help optimize warehouse space. For example, certain forklift trucks can be designed to be narrow aisle ones. The more narrow the gap between, if you can imagine, rows and rows of shelving, then the more space in the warehouse is usable. So we might have narrow aisle forklift trucks. Similarly, if we want to maximize ceiling height, high reach forklift trucks are also useful. Some trucks are electronically powered but do require a human to steer them. That does give more flexibility where the customer of Robo Bryce doesn't need those AMRs with the onboard intelligence, for example. So hand trucks are also developed, and the humble shelving. But again, what we will see in the pre-scene is that Robo Bryce's modular shelving units that are very, very flexible, which again is important to customers, are a very important item. We will meet Pavrobot later on. That is Robo Bryce's main competitor. And Pavrobot doesn't offer any of the products from the Darland factory. So this gives Robo Bryce a strategic advantage over Pavrobot. And as well as that, when Pavrobot is making its own carousels for its own customers, it will recommend that those customers use Robo Bryce's shelving. So again, we can't underestimate the importance of the product portfolio that is in the Darland factory. And for me, the fact that Robo Bryce offers both the more forward-looking products from the Tesla factory and the more traditional products from the Darland factory is advantageous. Now let's take a look at those more innovative products from the Tesla factory in a little bit more detail. As I said, when I talked about Robo Bryce's positioning or sort of like a USP, I would say innovation is one of those. We see that as a theme throughout the pre-scene. And therefore, research and development is extremely important. And the pre-scene goes on to detail 3 areas of research and development. We have mechanical engineering, focusing on R&D, electrical engineering, focusing on the electrical side of R&D, and then our software engineers for those autonomous products with that onboard intelligence. So let's have an overview of these. So we'll start off with our mechanical focus and the mechanical engineers. What these guys are focusing on is developing the physical attributes of the autonomous products. That's our carousels and our robots. And examples would be increasing capacity. We've talked about how that is important to Robo Bryce's customers, and also precision. Precision is really important, I would say, for 2 reasons. If you look at some of the KPIs that Robo Bryce's customers are focusing on, they want to have pick accuracy. So they want the right goods to come to the right picker at the right time. So precision is really important. And as we said, warehouses are expensive to run. We all know from our studies how expensive it is to hold inventory, and therefore maximizing capacity and having the right physical attributes of a product to do that is extremely important to our customers. Alongside the mechanical engineers, we have our electrical engineers. And the focus for this group of staff is improving the power and charging times of both autonomous and non-autonomous products. Let me give you the example of a mobile robot within a warehouse. Now, we want to get maximum efficiency out of a mobile robot. They're already arguably more efficient than a human operative. Robots don't need holidays. They don't get sick. They can work 24/7, for example. But when do robots have downtime? They will have some downtime, for example, when they need to be recharged. And therefore, if we can improve the battery life, the battery efficiency, and improve the charging times, then we can deliver that benefit and that increase in efficiency. Our customers will get a better return on investment on their robotic purchases. So that's an example of what our electrical engineers do. And obviously that is going to work hand in hand with the mechanical engineers to do that. And then importantly, we have our software engineers. Now, these guys are really focusing on those autonomous mobile robots, the AMRs, and they are designing and testing the code that is going to focus on those mobile robots. Now, a big area for the software engineers is to make sure that the automated products, the carousels and the robots will work with individual clients' WMS, warehouse management systems. So if you think about something like an inventory system that is automated, for example, I think we've all probably seen examples of warehouse systems that use AI, use algorithms to maximize efficiency. Our products have to be able to blend in with that. Ideally, we want an integrated system that when a customer of one of our clients places an order, then the warehouse system as a whole can locate that product, can bring it to the picker, can track the movement of that inventory and track its dispatch. That's what our software engineers need to do. Our products, our software need to be flexible enough to mesh with a client's warehouse management system. That's absolutely vital. As you'll see in the pre-scene webinar, we also highlighted that as a potential threat. What if our competitor, for example, PavRobot, designs some products that fit with their own software and actually would lock out our systems, so would lock out Robo Bryce's systems? They are not compatible. And again, if they did that on a particularly price competitive basis, that would have a significant impact on our products. So if they made a closed ecosystem with their software and products, then clients wouldn't have the choice of coming and working with Robo Bryce. So again, I think that's quite a likely exam day scenario, and we will prepare you for that as we go through the pre-scene webinar and the various different examples that we look at. So now that we've had a look at the company and overview, we've got a little bit of a feel for some of the locations and the products, and we've had a little look at the areas of innovation and research and development. Now let's take a look at the culture of Robo Bryce and have a look at our core values and our mission statement. Now, the core values, this is often an area of the pre-scene that I would quote the most. It's certainly up there in my top 5 pages in the pre-scene that we will use. The core values are public statements that the board of Robo Bryce has made to all of its stakeholders. This is how we want to operate. These are the standards that we hold ourselves to. And what you will find on exam day is oftentimes you will be comparing a potential plan or proposal, or maybe an action that Robo Bryce has already taken with these values. And you will need to think about what the impact on stakeholders is if we're maybe not acting in accordance with those values. So let's take a look. The first value is to enhance social well-being and quality of life. So this one, it's a little bit vague, but I think it is relatively contemporary. What we're seeing is more and more organizations, especially listed companies, having core values that are consistent with that ESG agenda, the environmental, social and governance agenda. And that's very much what we're seeing here. Now, social well-being is not drilled down in any more detail, so it is very, very wide. Similarly, quality of life. But I think we can infer that this will cover a wide range of stakeholders. So our clients' customers, our staff, and maybe even the general public in the areas in which we operate. And social well-being can go from health and safety to environmental consciousness, as well as maybe things like fair remuneration, fair pay, fair terms for everyone who works for us. So I think this one is sufficiently wide. I think you will be quoting this quite a lot come exam day. The next one I think is even more vague. They aim to meet stakeholder needs. So again, the stakeholders are not defined and certainly not prioritized. So this is a wee bit unusual, I would say, for a strategic case study pre-scene. You know, normally we would see the prioritization of maybe staff or investors, that side of things. But aiming to meet stakeholder needs, it's a wee bit of a nothing one for me. Of course, we want to meet stakeholder needs. But again, it's very quotable because it is so wide. And the last one, I think, fits with what we know about Robo Bryce so far, to innovate and be at the forefront of using new technology. So I like this one. And I imagine that you will apply this one quite a lot. So for example, if you are faced with evaluating a new strategic option that maybe looks at developing new technology or acquiring an innovative company, you could say that that is consistent with the core value to innovate and be at the forefront of new technology. So I do imagine that you will use that. And based on the pre-scene, we have seen that Robo Bryce has been living this value in terms of what it has done to date. Now, as well as the core values, let's take a look at the mission statement. As you know, the mission statement is the most generalized objective of an organization, and it is one that we use a lot within our exam day answers. You can use it to assess if a strategic proposal or plan is going to be suitable for the organization. And it's not a bad one, to be fair. It is pursue the growth of our business in a manner that advances social well-being. So this one is a little bit more meaningful to me than, say, that middle core value. It does say that the business is there to grow. If I was an investor or a potential investor, this would bring me some comfort that there is a growth agenda. And it is very much balanced out by that first core value of social well-being. Again, you can imagine an exam day scenario where there might be a wee bit of conflict between pursuing growth, the first aspect of the mission statement, and how we do that with being consistent with social well-being. There's always going to be a potential conflict between which of those that we want to maximize, growth or social well-being. So that one could be quite interesting, and you could bring out some nice points if you're applying the mission statement. Make sure you use the growth element and the social well-being element as well. Now let's have a look at who we are going to be working with. So our role is to be a senior finance manager, and we're working directly with the board. That's why we get the more interesting questions at strategic case study, because we are advising the board on a regular basis. And the board structure is something that you need to be very familiar with if you're going to successfully tackle the questions on corporate governance. So the board consists of 5 executive directors and 4 non-executive directors. Now, the 4 non-executive directors is made up of our chairperson and then 3 independent non-executive directors. So the first thing that we would note from the board structure is that our board is not sufficiently independent. If we use the UK Corporate Governance Code as a reference point, the UK code says that you should have at least as many independent non-executive directors as you have executive directors, okay? Whereas we have 5 executive directors and 3 independent non-executive directors. Now, that is a valid point. You can bring that up in terms of bias within the board. You can bring it up in terms of maybe a failure to identify and mitigate risks, because that's why we need our NEDs, our non-executive directors, to help balance out any threats to objectivity. But it is not unusual for a strategic case study pre-scene for that to be the case. So it's not particularly relevant to Robo Bryce. Let's have a look at our executive directors. So as you imagine, we have a CEO, that's Eva. We have a chief operating officer, that's Eamon. Felice is our CFO. Felice is the one that we are going to be working with the most. She's the one that's going to give us all of our tasks. Research and development has a director, which shows the importance of it to the company, that there's a board role. That's Hassan. And then the HR director is Ho. Again, staff are extremely important to the success of Robo Bryce, as you would imagine. And having an HR director on the board shows the importance of that. What you will note is that there is no Chief Technology Officer, CTO, or no Chief Information Officer, CIO, on the board. And I think personally that is a weakness from a corporate governance point of view, and we will elaborate on that in our webinars. Now, following good practice for corporate governance, the board also has 4 committees: the Audit Committee, Risk Committee, Remuneration Committee, and Nominations Committee. And these are staffed by our non-executive director. So generally, again, following corporate governance best practice, a couple of concerns there again, and they will be detailed in the pre-scene webinar. Now let's have a look at the board. We get quite a lot of detail in terms of people's bios and backgrounds and what they have done within the pre-scene. And overall, the board of directors does have a really nice range of experts, and they have a diverse range of fields, but very much relevant to our industry. They have that varied experience, which is perfect. That's what the nomination committee wants to do, to make sure that there is a sufficient variety of skills on the board. And for example, the chairperson has directly relevant experience, having previously been a professor of engineering. What you'll also note on the board when you look at the pre-scene, which is quite interesting, is there are quite a lot of internal promotions. And I think this is interesting about Robo Bryce. We talked about the importance of staff. We're going to see that there's a principal risk with regard to staff as well. But the fact that many members of the board have risen up through the ranks, that has got to be a good thing for staff retention. It shows that we believe in internal promotion, and also from a board point of view, it means they've walked the walk. They will know the details of how things work within our production facilities, etc., etc. So make sure you have a look at those board bios, because it is something that you can draw down on quite a lot when you are looking at corporate governance questions, or even evaluating proposals in terms of the skill base that we have, to see if we can take things forward. Now, I have said that one of my favorite pages in the pre-scene is core values and the vision and the mission, but the single page that I use the most in pre-scene is this one, the principal risks and responses. So although you do have access to the pre-scene on exam day within the exam, I would strongly encourage you to learn off by heart certain areas. Core values and mission would be one of those, and another one would be your principal risks and the responses. Now, this is an extract from Robo Bryce's annual report and accounts. This is a public statement of the principal risks. They will have an internal document, being that risk register that sits behind this. So remember, this is the public-facing statement of risks. And also it states what they do to mitigate the risks. And your task is to think, is this adequate? So when we look at the principal risks, you need to ask yourself, are all the risks that we face as an organization sufficiently disclosed? And then also ask yourself, are the responses to those risks sufficient? Are they robust enough? Put yourself in the shoes of an investor or a customer or a supplier, or maybe someone who works for Robo Bryce. What do you think? And there is plenty to critique. I also use the principal risk page all the time. If I am asked about strategic implications, then how does it impact on one or more of our principal risks? If I am asked about strategic evaluation, does it exacerbate some of our risks, or does it help mitigate some of those risks? I am always using this page, so it's really, really important. Now, there are 5 principal risks, and we have them broken down here. One of them we split into 2 because there's 2 parts we want to highlight. So the first risk is that customer demand is highly cyclical. Now, this is going to impact Robo Bryce in terms of profitability, but don't forget cash flow as well. Cash flow, very important, obviously, to any business. And if customer demand falls, because then we're going to run out of cash. And why is cash extremely important to Robo Bryce? Think about research and development. That is going to be very, very thirsty for lots and lots of cash. We have to invest in R&D before we can come up with a new product, before that product becomes cash generative. So don't forget profitability and cash flow to add more depth to your answers. Now, when you look at this in the pre-scene in more detail, you'll also see that our customers are extremely cost conscious. Yeah. That can be a threat for us because if times are tough for them, they might cut costs and they might decide to invest less in their warehouse systems. That's bad news for us. But the fact that they are cost conscious can also be an opportunity for us because think about what we said for all of our products. We are trying to maximize capacity. We are trying to maximize flexibility. We are trying to maximize the throughput of items within a warehouse. All of those will support an efficient cost base for our customers. So there's quite a lot to think about around there, okay? Now, what is our response to this risk? Well, Robo Bryce says that it adapts plans and budgets to information about customers. You might be thinking, that's a wee bit wishy-washy, and I would agree. That doesn't really give me that much confidence that it is being mitigated, but it does show that we will constantly have to reevaluate our customers, constantly have to reevaluate what we're doing and our budgets, okay? Next risk is that customer projects are significant and long in length. Let's look at the two words that we have here. So project-based work, as you can imagine, if we are doing, let's say, a whole warehouse refit or designing a new bespoke warehouse for someone, we can get the idea that this is project-based work. The fact that customer projects are significant means that if we were to lose an individual customer, that could have a significant impact on both our profitability and cash flow. And the fact that projects are longer term in length, well, that makes forecasting more difficult. Our customer, link it back to that first risk, might be going through various different cycles that expand the length of these longer projects. So try to think about these two risks together. The fact that projects are longer and large is definitely impactful on the fact that demand is cyclical and vice versa. So what is our response here? Projects are closely monitored and contracts have detailed specifications. The close monitoring, I think we've already talked about when we look at adapting plans, but contracts having detailed specifications, I think this is interesting. The individuals within the business who agree certain milestones within a contract, who agree certain prices, etc., that's a lot of responsibility. What, for example, would happen if the foreign exchange risk occurs? So the Forex exchange rate between us and a customer might move. That could have a significant impact on this. What does the contract say to mitigate it? What happens if a customer changes their mind? That has a significant cost impact on us, as well as a scheduling impact. What does the contract say there? So I think these contracts are really important as well. As we said before, Robo Bryce is a global business. It does business in many different countries. So we've seen that we have our Darland and Testland operations, and customers and suppliers will be on a global basis. As you can imagine, this exposes us to foreign exchange risk, and the response is to hedge currency risks as appropriate. So take this as a huge hint that you need to be all over your Forex risks and appropriate hedging in order to apply those on exam day. Now, the next risk we've broken down into two boxes here. These are regarding IT risk and cyber security. So the first element of this is that Robo Bryce recognizes that it faces an IT risk for its own operations. And here, this is our classic cybersecurity risk question. This comes up in every single sitting. It might not come up in your variant, but it comes up in every single sitting. Generally, I would advise you to be aware of the most common cyber risks and the responses that are appropriate to those. Robo Bryce says that systems are in place for the management of IT risks. Now, for me, again, this might be a little bit high level in terms of a response. And think about linking this back to board structure. We said that they didn't have a chief technology officer or a chief information security officer on the board. Perhaps the fact that this risk is maybe a little bit under-identified and under-mitigated, combined with the fact that we don't have that role on the board, is indicative of Robo Bryce maybe not taking cybersecurity risk as seriously as it should. The other side of the IT risk is related to the system design and installation. So essentially our autonomous and automated products. This could be a huge risk for our customers. So we are in those high tech product areas, and we might cause a problem for some of our customers if there is a weakness in one of our systems. Don't forget, it integrates with their systems, and that causes an increased cybersecurity risk for our customers. So what we do again is review the IT risks and keep them under constant review. Again, a wee bit wishy-washy in my view. I think we would like to see a little bit more detail there. Definitely an exam day scenario to prepare for there. And then the final risk is with regard to the reliance on both technical and management staff. So this really highlights the importance of staff to Robo Bryce. And for me, it really underlines that core value as well. I think there's a very high likelihood that you will be tested on the risk with regard to maybe staff retention, and linking that to the core value and mission with regard to social well-being. So the response to this risk is about investing in training and keeping salaries competitive. When you're having a look at investing in training, well, think about the fact that we've had a lot of those internal promotions at the board level. So that's a positive sign that there is training and development. When we look at keeping salaries competitive, what I would say there is we cannot solve any HR problems by offering more salaries, really. We do keep salaries competitive. And also ask yourself, does that fit with the overall mission of social well-being? You know, salaries are part of social well-being, that people are fairly remunerated, but may not be the complete picture there. But HR is an important issue, staff are an important issue. Link it back to the fact that we have an HR director on the board. Okay, so lots and lots of detail there, and you will see me in the applied webinars using the principal risks all the time. I also use it to help me generate ideas for my answers. So very, very important page. Now we're going to have a quick look at the finances, and I'm going to be quite high level on this. Sometimes it surprises students in the pre-SIM webinars that well, it sounds awful. I don't find the finances super interesting. I'll just take the key themes away. I'll maybe have a couple of key ratios that I use now and again, but actually it's not one of the most important areas of the pre-SIM from my point of view. So let's take a little look. So between 2001 2021, 2022, it's quite a good news story for Robo Bryce. Revenue increased, operating profits increased, profit after tax also increased. There was some investment in non-current assets, so they were up as well, and borrowing, or long-term borrowing, remained the same. Also, based on the information we have an increase in cash. Though remember, we only have the balance sheet information, the statement of financial position, so that cash is just what was available at year end. Another interesting thing to draw out of the finances is when we look at 2022, software development costs represented 28% of non-current assets. So significant intangible assets there on our statement of financial position. There's a couple of things we can say about that. It underlines the importance of research and development for us, but also intangible assets are less useful for securitization if we're looking at raising debt finance. Now we've calculated a number of key ratios for you. Again, I'll let you have a look at these in detail. There are a couple that I would tend to use now and again. For me, gearing is probably the most important one, but let's take a look. Again, it's relatively good news. So our operating profit margin, again, shows an improving position. When we look at the net profit margin, again, nice healthy figures there, shows an improving position. And again, from an investor point of view, hopefully happy that they can see an improving position. Now, that return on capital employed, I might use as a benchmark to evaluate any future acquisitions or development. So our investors are currently having a return on capital employed of 14.6%. They're not really going to want to see a dip in that. So that's maybe something that you could use that. Now, our cash conversion cycle shows a dip, a declining position. However, for me, this isn't a huge issue, because when you look at your current ratio and you look at your quick ratio, you will see that we don't seem to have liquidity problems. That said, I do think cash is extremely important to this business. Remember, we need to fund that R&D, and we're not going to be able to develop cash generative products in the short term. R&D tends to be more of a longer term thing. Gearing is one ratio that I do use, and the definition for gearing that I tend to use is where we look at long-term debt over long-term debt plus equity. But if you choose to use a different gearing ratio, that is fine. And our gearing has actually fallen a little bit, so a slightly improved position. A common question that we often get, and it's a very, very valid question, is, well, what is the ideal gearing? Is this too high risk? And it is relatively high as a gearing position, but doesn't necessarily mean it's too high. The only information that we have about sort of the industry and about Tesla is to compare it to our competitor, Pavrobot's gearing, and it is broadly similar. So comments that you could make is that, you know, we do have some headroom within our gearing ratio, but investors might get a little bit anxious if it goes maybe too much higher, but then point out that it is fairly comparable with Pavrobot's gearing. Now, a couple of bits of supplementary information, and then we'll give you a taster of some potential exam day scenarios. Competition. We are one of 6 major companies in the industry that offer automated products. And as I've said before, our major competitor is Pavrobot. You will have some details on Pavrobot and financials for comparative on Pavrobot. Now, as I said earlier, Pavrobot are restricted to offering autonomous products. They don't offer those Darland products that we do. And I think that is an advantage to us. Pavrobot, however, is larger than Robo Bryce, both in terms of revenue and in terms of its profits. And if we are looking to set the improvements in Robo Bryce's finances in context, Pavrobot's revenues and profits have grown more. So how do we use this? An investor in Robo Bryce is likely to use Pavrobot as a benchmark. And maybe there's going to be a little bit of pressure on the board to improve those margins and improve those ratios further. And as I said, from a gearing point of view, Pavrobot's gearing ratio is slightly higher than Robo Bryce's at 52%. I would use that to show a benchmark that our gearing ratio is not unusual. So continuing on with the supplementary bits and bobs now, then let's look at the Darland factory. Now, the rationale that the company, the Precinct, gives for moving certain operations to Darland is it has a relatively weak economy compared to Tesland, and wages for both skilled and unskilled labor are relatively low. So this was the reason for offshoring there. Again, I think Darland is going to be tested in every single sitting. There's quite a lot that we could look at. If you're looking at the wages being low, for example, contrast that with our mission and our values about social well-being. How does it sit with that, for example? How does offshoring fit with the social well-being of our Tesland employees, for example? Now, when we're looking at automated warehouse equipment, I've already talked about how important it is that this will always integrate with the client's warehouse management system. I think that is a key issue. It has to integrate, and remember, from the principal risks, we don't want it to exacerbate or increase a client's cybersecurity risk either. When we're looking at our autonomous mobile robots, these are the ones with the onboard intelligence. They can detect through a series of sensors any obstacles and plan their own routes. I think this could be a testing ground in a number of ways. For example, there could be a problem with the software or the hardware and the sensors, and maybe an autonomous mobile robot will not avoid an obstacle. And in the worst case scenario, that obstacle could be a human worker within the warehouse. Unfortunately, in the real world, there are many examples of this, including recently last week. So it's not a pleasant thing to look at, but I do think it is something that you should be aware of as a risk. I think this opens up a really interesting area for testing. Whose responsibility would it be if, for example, everything was fine with our product, but it wasn't operated correctly by one of our customers? So you can see ethics coming in there, as well as IT risk, reputational risk, our core values, etc. So that is something that I would have a look at and prepare. When we go back to our automated guided vehicles, these are the ones without the onboard intelligence. As I said before, these are guided by either a central system, they move on rails, or they scan barcodes. They can't navigate around obstacles. And again, I think this brings out a health and safety risk. Again, the worst obstacle would be a human obstacle. And again, how do we deal with that? How do we encourage or ensure that our customers are operating these in a safe way? Or from an ethical point of view, do we have to go that far? Where does our responsibility end? Now, when you're looking at the pre-scene, please have a look at the articles towards the end of the pre-scene. These are always a hint about what might get tested. And one of those articles is about a lights out warehouse. So this is an innovative new offering. Robo Bryce has designed a fully automated warehouse for one of Tesla's supermarkets, and it's a lights out warehouse. Again, I would encourage you to have a look at real world examples of different types of warehouses and specialist warehouses. So for example, what have I looked at? Healthcare products. They are very important for security. You know, that is heavily regulated items if we're looking at drugs and pharmacy products, for example, and the warehouse management systems have to meet all of those health and safety and regulatory requirements. Chilled foods, for example, are very important as well. So there are cold specialist warehouses, etc., etc. And then increasing automation is changing the nature of work performed in warehouses. There is plenty that you can have a look at in the real world, and I do highlight these in the pre-scene webinar. So for example, we tend to see articles on this around Black Friday and Cyber Monday, where warehouses are very busy, and you tend to get good news articles or good videos to watch about human operatives working in collaboration with those more automated and innovative products to meet customer demand. Now, in terms of potential exam day scenarios, there are so many. And if you choose to sign up for a course, we will highlight some in the pre-scene webinars. We will do a deep dive on those in the Applied Series webinars. I love the Applied Series. In each one, I think we cover 4 exam standard subtasks that not only give you ideas of potential exam day scenarios, but show you the application of the technical knowledge. The key issues webinar, again, we talk about scenarios, and clearly the 5 exam standard mocks will prepare you for potential scenarios as well. But just to give you a taster, a new business area. I think this is something that comes up very, very regularly. So you might see that Robo Bryce is looking at investing in designing and developing a new and innovative product. Now, to prepare for this, and so you don't have any nasty surprises, I would have a quick look at the real world. What are companies doing? Like Robo Bryce, so have a look at Grey Orange, have a look at Honeywell. What are they doing? And one of the things that you'll see is a warehouse drone. Again, I find it interesting. It brings your studies alive. And typically, if this is an exam day scenario, you might get asked to look at the suitability, acceptability, and feasibility of this proposal. Or you might get asked, what are the strategic implications of this proposal? It might also be, how do we fund it? for example. So that's the type of question that you might get there. Another possible strategic choice will be making an acquisition. So Robo Bryce might acquire a company in a related or an unrelated industry. And again, you might be asked to evaluate it. You might be asked about strategic implications. You might be asked about valuations as well, if it is a private business, funding. And you can also get tested on corporate governance issues if Robo Bryce is to have a new subsidiary. So it might be around internal controls or maybe the role of that subsidiary board. It's a very common scenario, and I think quite a likely one. So rehearse and practice. What do you think Robo Bryce might buy, and work through some of those ideas. It's a great way to revise your strategic level theory as well. Now, instead of an acquisition, we might get tested on a divestment. I think this is highly likely because I think that Robo Bryce might look to sell the Darland operation, perhaps to release funds to invest in a new business area or a new acquisition. Or it might decide that it wants to change its strategic focus and focus on those autonomous products. So again, make sure that you have practiced the suitability, acceptability, and feasibility of that. Have a think about the strategic implications. Strategic implications, again, a nice easy win there is how does it impact on our principal risks? Think about how you might value the Darland operation. And again, think about how you might use those funds. What would you use the funds to do? What opportunities are available to Robo Bryce? And the other frequently tested area is with regard to cybersecurity. So on exam day, you might see a cyber attack. And this is where the company's products and or internal systems might become vulnerable to cyber attacks. What we tend to get tested on here would be, let's say, the impact, maybe identifying and managing the interests of key stakeholders following an attack. And then you're often asked to recommend internal controls that might help have prevented the attack in the first place. And sometimes that gets rolled in with maybe internal audit, then looking at tests of control on those afterwards. So just a little taster of some of the scenarios that you might see. Okay, so hopefully that is helpful. So that's our overview of the pre-scene. Now, hopefully, this is either going to be an area that you're going to think, yay, I'm all over these key theories, or you're going to be thinking, oh no, I've got quite a lot of work to do. But no matter what, rest assured that even if you look at all of these and you think I'm a bit ropey on all of these, you've got plenty of time to prepare. So let me start off with a word of warning for you. So this part of the webinar is going to involve discussing key areas of the strategic syllabus. However, you need to cover all the areas of E3, P3, and F3. What I want you all to do is make sure that you access the blueprint for strategic case study. You can get that from CIMA. Those of you that are joining the elite course, that is one of the first things that we will do in our first session. So we're going to have a look at the blueprint, and within the blueprint, it gives the core activities, which is essentially what you are going to be tested on. And some of you might know these as the I can statements. I think there's about 16 of them split between E3, P3, and F3. So for example, I can evaluate strategic opportunities. I can evaluate the importance of a digital strategy. And what I would do is I would have that list in front of you, I would have the pre-scene in front of you, and I would balance both of those together. So make sure that you can do all of those things in the context of the pre-scene. So I will walk the elite group through that. I tend to use that as a study tool as well. I am all about active studying to maximize the time spent on study, but also our examiner is telling us time and time again, the theory is one thing, but if it is not applied, you will not be scoring those higher marks. So caution, cover everything, but focus on the ones in the core activities in the blueprint. Now, one thing that I find with students is there will be areas that they don't like, and it varies from student to student, but most people don't like currency risk, for example, or scenario planning tends to be another one that people don't like. And what they do is they keep thinking, oh, I don't like that, so I'm not going to do it. And that is a bad strategy. It is so tempting to work on what you like and what you're comfortable with and exclude the topics that you struggle with. But I would advise you to do the opposite, is go for the things that you don't like first. There's lots of advantages. It gives you more time to address them. And, you know, this is your last exam. You are going to be qualified after this and you're going to get nervous. And I think if you deal with the things that you're worried about first, then you're going to be more relaxed and you will study better and perform better if you're more relaxed. So please, one of the things I would urge you to do is when we go through these key theories, make a note of the ones that you're not sure of, and then make a plan of how you're going to feel more comfortable with those. So please play it safe. I am risk averse. The elite group will know how risk averse I am, and cover all areas and learn it in an applied way. Don't go over all of the theory in isolation. Get out your pre-scene and apply it all to the pre-scene, because then you're working more efficiently. Okay, so that's my little caution, little lecture there. Right, from a P3 point of view, what do we say are some of the key issues? Now, P3 is really important. It is tested all the time, and students do find areas of this tricky. So, for example, corporate governance, students tend to find that tricky, and internal controls and internal audit. You'll hear me say this time and time again, but the applied series of webinars are fantastic. I love them, because we will give you a theory top up, but as well how it is tested. So again, you're doing those multiple skills at once. So what do you need to be comfortable with? You need to be able to apply the theory on risk identification and management. I use this a lot in strategic case study. I use it to help shape and structure my answers. So for risk identification, we know we're using things like PESTEL, Porter's 5 forces, SWOT analysis, and not all risks are going to be mitigated. We have to think about likelihood and impact. So we evaluate risks by likelihood and impact, and we go forward with the most important ones. That likelihood and impact for risk evaluation, I use a lot in my answer structures. Risk management, think about things like the TARA model, for example. So transfer, accept, reduce, avoid. Again, it can help provide a nice structure to some of your answers. For corporate governance, for cyber risk, you need to be aware, as I've said before, about the common threats. So do you know what a DDoS attack is, for example? Do you know what ransomware is? Do you know what a Trojan horse is, for example? So common threats that you might see. Phishing is another one, and social engineering, and what the typical impact of those would be. I also advise that you brush up on the AIC triad. So when we're looking at cybersecurity, the 4 objectives of cybersecurity tend to be A, that data has to be available to be useful. So obviously in a ransomware attack, that is a huge threat. The integrity is the I in the AIC triad. That's the integrity of the data and the processes. And then the C is confidentiality. And for cyber risk, remember as well, prevention, detection, and response. Make sure that you are familiar with the common controls to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber attacks. The other thing that I think is coming up more and more is cyber security reporting, and having your cyber security risk management report and having a public statement of what you've done, and maybe having that audited by an independent person as well. Then corporate governance is tested all the time. So make sure that you know the general board responsibilities, the committee of the board roles and responsibilities, and don't forget that the board is there to act as agents for the shareholders and other stakeholders. So get up to speed with corporate governance best practice. Clearly, there's a huge overlap with risk management there as well. Internal controls, I find that students are a little bit ropier on, and I do cover this in the applied series, so I don't want to go into too much detail here, but remember that internal controls start with risk identification. So you see a risk, and then you want to reduce that risk by putting in certain controls. Remember, controls are policies and procedures to reduce risk down to a tolerable level. If I was giving you advice on internal controls, I would say make them practical. They are policies and procedures. So again, in any exam day scenario, you need to be making concrete suggestions. Are they practical? Are they addressing the risk in the scenario, the risk that you have been asked to have a look at? With internal controls, internal audit is frequently tested. So make sure you know the purpose of internal audit. What's its role? What is its scope? And tie it in with corporate governance. A key thing for internal audit is it independent? And you will see in the pre-scene that the head of internal audit reports to the audit committee, and that follows best practice. Typically, where you have internal controls in one part of a requirement, you might be asked about internal audit coming in and testing those controls. So tests of controls there. Risk reporting, when we looked at the principal risk report, we said that is the external statement that the company has made about risk reporting. However, it is highly likely, I would say a certainty, that they will have their internal risk register. And we are seeing more questions on risk registers. So make sure that you understand the purpose of a risk register and what commonly would be included on that. A typical question is that something has gone wrong in an exam day scenario and the board is being critiqued. Should this have been included on the risk register? And you need to explore that in your answer. Scenario planning is something that comes up a lot. And when we see scenario planning, it is often specifically referenced in the requirement. It will say using scenario planning or using 3 scenarios, and then go on either to talk about evaluating strategic implications or maybe looking at risk management. So my top tips when you see scenario planning would be to think about high impact and high uncertainty events. Yeah. So we use scenario planning when there's high levels of uncertainty, because if we know it's going to happen, we don't need a scenario plan. And scenario planning is, it's quite expensive. It requires coordination amongst the senior people in an organization, etc. So we're only going to do it for those high impact events. Again, I find that those 2 things, impact and uncertainty, can help me structure my answers. And then finally, we've got reputation and political risk. Reputational risk is tested quite a lot. So think about our values and our mission, our public statements. Have we done anything that clashes with those that would cause reputational risk? Think about social well-being. Have we done anything that clashes with our public statement on social well-being? That might be to do with health and safety. It might be to do with pay, for example. And political risk, that can come in terms of maybe treatment of staff. Is the government going to change minimum wage legislation, health and safety laws? Or think about the fact that we'll also be impacted by other governments because we're a global business. So for example, is the Darwin government going to do anything that could impact upon our Darwin operations? So a little bit of a flavour of P3 for you there. I'll be interested to see if you find that comforting or worrying. Let's do the same now for F3. So F3 is an area that's frequently tested in strategic case study, and these are just some of the things that could come up. Now with F3, when it is tested, I find that this is where our answers are slightly more technical, and I actually find that my word count on the F3 tasks or subtasks is a little bit lower in general. Now that's a blessing and a curse, because we might worry that we don't have enough to say, but when we come on to E3, I often find that we so much to say that then we're worried about time. So there's different skills in different pillars that we need to bring in when we're looking at a successful strategic case study answer. So let's have a look. You need to be familiar with methods of raising long-term finance, the advantages and disadvantages of those, and the key then is to tailor and apply that to the exam day scenario. So in its simplest form, do you know the merits and demerits of debt finance and equity finance? Remember, we are a listed business, so one form of equity finance might be a rights issue. Make sure you understand a rights issue, make sure you understand some of the challenges and considerations that the board would have to resolve to have a successful rights issue. You also need to be able to understand and describe and explain share price movements. So here, the key theory that you need to be aware of is the efficient market hypothesis. That is frequently tested. Make sure that you're comfortable with that and that you're able to apply it. A little bit of an overlap between areas of the syllabus is integrated reporting. So initially, make sure that you're happy with the 6 capitals of integrated reporting. So your human capital, manufactured, intellectual, social and relationship capital, natural capital, and financial. You may be asked about one or more of those specifically within a requirement. So for example, something happens, how does this impact our human capital? Something happens, how does this impact our intellectual capital? What I would do is I would prepare in advance, or at least practice your thought process by having a look at the pre-scene, write the 6 capitals out and think, well, you know, what does Robo Bryce do that enhances each of the 6 capitals? Is there anything that they should be doing that they're not doing? So prepare in advance for that. Currency risk, we've already talked about. It's highly likely you'll be tested on this. We're a global operation. You need to be able to briefly define economic risk in terms of currency risk, translation risk, mainly with regard to Darland, for example, and the most important one is transaction risk. So make sure you understand what they are and be aware of the most common hedging strategies for transaction risk, the advantages and disadvantages, but the key is to tailor and apply that to the situation. Again, that is covered with an example in the applied series. You need to have a look at different methods of funding acquisitions. So that ties up to that long-term financing. Because we're listed, another way that we could fund an acquisition is with a share-for-share exchange. So make sure that you're aware of the mechanics of how that works and some of the merits and demerits of a share-for-share exchange. It may be that you need to do a business valuation. That might be for the divestment of Darland. How do we place a value on it? Or it might be if we're looking at buying a private business. So make sure that you know the most common valuation techniques. But again, the key is application. What we don't want to see is a sterile regurgitation of theory. It's got to be practical and it's got to be applied. So don't forget things like any business valuation. You know, it's an art, it's not a science, and ultimately it is going to depend on negotiation. So think about, if we're selling Darland, we want to raise that price as high as possible. What negotiating points could we bring in? If we're buying something, we want to get that price down as low as possible. So again, what negotiating points could come in? You need to be aware of post-acquisition issues, whether they be a change in the company's risk profile, movements in the share price, impact on dividend, and link it into P3 and governance issues as well. You know, for example, if we have a new subsidiary, how are we going to manage risk in terms of more holistic internal controls? What about some issues with that subsidiary company board, for example? And then the final F3 point is looking at our dividend policies. So make sure that you're up to speed with common dividend policies and what the impact of a change in a dividend policy might be for Robo Bryce. And then finally, let's have a look at E3. I think this is students' favorite area. It is the most comfortable area. And I think it brings its own challenges. because when we've more to say, it's quite hard to only put down our best points, and it can be harder to structure an answer as well. But we've got to have a really good understanding of the concepts in E3, and as it says here, this applies to all the pillars. It has to be applied. The examiner says that time and time again. So strategic evaluation using suitability, acceptability, feasibility, that comes up quite a lot. Ethics usually comes up in a number of the variants. When you're asked about ethical implications, they do want to see the 5 ethical principles, or the ones that are relevant, applied. So objectivity, professional conduct, professional competence and due care, integrity and confidentiality. They will be looking for those words and the application to the scenario. Ecosystems, they are referenced within the blueprint, so within the core activities for this paper, but they don't tend to be directly tested. And what I want you to do is have a look at the pre-scene and have a look at the more complex ecosystems within there and the impact of them. So for example, Pavrobot is a competitor, but it is more complicated than that because Pavrobot is also one of our customers, and it recommends that its customers use our Darlin products, for example. So that's one example of a complexity within the ecosystem. So the best way to prepare for those is just to explore them in the pre-scene, have a think about them, think about the relationships, and that should get you ready for any question in that area. You've also got to have a look at the external analysis for strategic planning. So although you will never be asked to do a Pestel analysis or a SWOT analysis or Porter's 5 forces in case study, or at least based on my experience, I would still practice those. It's a great way to get used to the pre-scene, and then you can draw on that external analysis and apply it in various different exam day scenarios. Similarly, please go through the pre-scene and have a look at all of the stakeholders. Now, this is a great example of where I'm saying I want you to revise your theory, but in an applied way. So Mendeley is the most important theory here. I want you to draw out Mendeley's matrix, and I want you to map on the pre-scene stakeholders by reference to interest levels and power levels. So you will be revising the theory and you will be learning the pre-scene. But please remember, come exam day, when you see a scenario, remember that levels of interest and levels of power can vary depending on what the scenario is. So be prepared to flex what you have done in terms of your preparation. I've already said knowing the mission, vision, and values and applying those is very important. So you might want to link that to evaluating strategies. When we look at the suitability of a strategy, that's in terms of the mission and also in terms of strategic fit. One area that students find difficult is digital strategy and technology, and it is a common theme. We're seeing this more and more in strategic case studies. So I would urge you to go through the pre-scene and think, well, what is Robo Bryce's current digital strategy? That might be in terms of the products that it offers. It might be in terms of how much it has automated its own Tesla factory. For example, what are the weaknesses in Robo Bryce's digital strategy? For example, board level role, we've got no CTO. So do things like that to practice what the digital strategy is, and also look for gaps. Look at real world examples, look at what those companies are doing, and that might highlight gaps in Robo Bryce's digital strategy, and that will help prepare you for questions in that area. And then finally, we have managing performance. So looking at performance measures, looking at KPIs. This very much links in with P3 in terms of internal controls. It also links in with F3, for example, integrated reporting. If it were me, I would be thinking about KPIs for Robo Bryce. It helps you understand the pre-scene in a lot more detail. So can you think of a KPI for each of the 6 capitals for integrated reporting? Can you think of some KPIs for each of maybe the balance scorecard, something like that? Okay, so that is just a little overview of some of the key theories, with hopefully a list of things that you can use as part of your action plan to get you ready for strategic case study. Now, the last bit we have is looking at your action plan in more detail. So let's take a look at what you need to pass this exam. Okay, this is what we would recommend. So first up, you need to understand the mechanics of the strategic case study exam itself. It is 3 tasks. It is always 3 tasks, and each task, assuming you're on the standard timing, is 1 hour. Now, typically, these tasks are broken down into 2 subtasks, though you can have 3. Very unusual to see 4 subtasks. More and more, it's broken down into just 2 subtasks. So what I would do to give yourself an understanding of the mechanics of the exam is get the blueprint. Have a look at the core activities for the technical detail that you need, and then have a look at a past exam paper to see what the paper looks like. Make sure that you look at the examiner's comments and the marking rubric on that. Again, if you're in the elite group, we will do that in our first session. We need to know what we are being asked to do and what we are working towards. So that's what I would do there. Then you need to have an excellent knowledge of the strategic level syllabus. We've given you some hints and some areas when we've looked at those key topics. Make sure that you watch the applied series. And as I said before, go for your weakest areas first. Get those nailed right away. It is absolutely vital to have exam technique. And again, I do this in the applied series. I will give you tips in terms of, I'm very much into thought process. How do we break down a requirement, look at the information in the question, and come up with a plan? You need to perform in 1 hour to give a complete answer, and you need to do that 3 times. That is not easy, but there is plenty of exam technique that you can experiment with throughout the course of the mocks so that you know what works for you on exam day. I can tell you what works for me, but I don't assume that everyone's the same. And what I would encourage you to do is experiment what works for you, target those weaknesses, improve so that when it comes to exam day and you open that first task, you know, for example, that 10 minutes planning and 50 minutes writing works for you. I had one student who preferred 30 minutes planning and 30 minutes writing. Whew, that would be not for me, but it shows that everyone's different. So you need to have an exam technique that works for you. That includes reading the requirement, effectively reading the information in the question, and then blending pre-seen knowledge, technical knowledge, and the unseen knowledge together to give a very effective answer. There is no perfect strategic case study answer, and the reason for that is you get 1 hour for every task. So there's never a perfect answer. You will always think about more things that you could have written laterally. And exam technique is the main focus of those detailed workshops and debriefs that we will have on the mocks. The examiner says time and time again that one weakness in students' papers is a lack of knowledge of the pre-seen. Remember, you are not being tested generically on your strategic level knowledge. You'll be tested on Robo Bryce. You are a senior finance manager in Robo Bryce. It's your company. It's your industry. You need to have a knowledge of that. You will build that up through the webinars, and you will also build it up through the mocks. But please, please make sure that you're all over the pre-seen. A huge challenge is time management. As I said, you get 1 hour per task, and the key thing is how do you spend that 1 hour in a way that helps you maximize your marks. That is something that I would imagine you're not going to get right first time, but with practice and reflection on how you've done, you will improve. Good time management, answering every part of the requirement is key, and also weighting your answer between the 2 subtasks appropriate to the marks available. Absolutely essential. And strategic case study does require some commitment. It is a passable exam. It really is. And actually, in my view, it is easier than management case study. And students tend to say that as well. So I'm hoping that gives you some confidence. But it isn't easy. It does take time and it does take commitment. You're all going to have busy lives. So let's have a look at things that we would say to help you with commitment towards passing. Now, we do appreciate that every student's circumstances will be different. Sometimes I have students that have come the whole way through the traditional CIMA route. Sometimes I've had them through the finance program. Sometimes people are taking their first CIMA exam at strategic case study level because they've had exemptions. So we've seen everything. We've seen students in different roles with different commitments at home. But generally, this is the guidance that we would have for everyone. First up, book your exam. You've got to commit to this. So get your exam booked and then become very familiar with the details of the exam. Look at past papers and make use of the CIMA resources. There's some great resources online, including the blueprint, that will get you up to speed with what you're being asked to do. Then get very familiar with the pre-scene document. Now, front load that by watching the 2 pre-scene webinars. And then what I would say is always have a couple of copies of the pre-scene where you're likely to be over the next 5 to 6 weeks, so that you can keep dipping in, dipping out. When you are doing your revision of your technical theory, use that pre-scene document. So just read it with interest. And then you will naturally begin to learn it off by heart. I don't think you need to sit and learn chunks of it. Read it with interest, read it with application, and you will be fine. Every single week, try to revise some of the key theory. We've given you some hints. Use the applied series of webinars as well, and maximize your time. So when you're looking at the theory, get your pre-scene document open and apply it. That is great practice for exam day. The single most important thing I would say is do the mock papers. Now, you will never feel ready to do a mock. That's normal, but you've got to do them. And if you start early on, the ideal is that you will do a mock, then you will mark it either yourself or with the marking service, and you will look at what you did well on, what you did less well on, and then that's your gap analysis. Where are your weaknesses? Where is the gap? Then you'll spend a couple of days working on addressing those weaknesses, and then you'll do another mock, yeah? And you'll repeat the process. And unless you start early with the mocks, you will not give yourself sufficient time to do that. The best students space the mocks out. It is not the same doing all 5 mocks in the last week before the exam. So dive into a mock. What's the worst that could happen? You get 0, but you'll learn from it, okay? So that's really, really important advice. So identify your weaknesses and then brush up on those areas before you do your next mock. And keep it going little and often. Constantly revise theory alongside the pre-scene and test your knowledge on a regular basis. Sometimes I find that students say, well, you know, I can't have 3 hours to sit down and do a mock. You don't have to do that all the time. Remember, if you can say, pick one area that you're worried about, let's say principal risks, sit down, learn those for 10 minutes. It might be a technical area. So you might think, gosh, I'm really not sure on hedging for foreign exchange risk. We'll sit down and spend 10 minutes on recapping those. 10 minutes isn't enough. Pick it up the next day for 10 minutes. Just plan ahead and keep going, and always work on the thing that you're worst at, because then that is the most effective use of your time. You know, and practice, it really does make perfect. Practice makes perfect. And the key to passing is practice, practice, practice. This is a practical exam, and you should prepare in a practical way. Make mistakes. If you make mistakes, that's great, because it highlights your weaknesses and it allows you to address them. And it really is important to spend as much time going over your mocks as you did doing the mocks, because you've got to learn from those mistakes and move forward. So it very much comes a learning cycle. It's about understanding the theory, then applying that theory either through past exam questions or the mock papers, etc., and then spending a lot of time evaluating your feedback. That might be the feedback from the marking service, it might be the feedback from the elite workshops, or it might be your own self-review when you're comparing your answer to the suggested Viva answer. And then make yourself a plan to address those weaknesses, implement the feedback, and then start the whole thing again. That is the key to success. It is the most efficient way of working. So in closing, I hope I haven't worried you. This is a really passable exam. One of the most common comments I get is that was easier than management case study. Yeah. So you can do it. No one would be looking at doing this course if they didn't have the ability to pass this exam. You do need to prepare. You do need to get some confidence, but it's very, very passable. So if you feel ready, what I would suggest you do is draft a study plan for yourself and get the exam booked. As we said, initial steps in that study plan should be having a look at that strategic syllabus. Start with the areas that you are the weakest at, and then make sure that you revise using the pre-seen document. The single best preparation is by doing practice questions. Now, you might do that if you sign up for one of our courses through the Applied series of webinars and the mocks. But if you choose not to sign up for one of the courses, have a look at past CIMA papers and solutions there on the CIMA website, and they are so useful. The lucky thing for the February 24 sitting is the, let me get the dates right here, the May and August 23 case study was on a company called Daystruck, and it was a third-party logistics company. So in other words, it's a bit like one of Robo Bryce's customers. I would start there, have a look at what was tested, have a look at the suggested answers from CIMA, and I think you'll be able to apply those to Robo Bryce, and that is great practice for you as well. But when you're doing that, whether on a Viva course or on your own, please take time to review your performance. It's going to maximize your study time and maximize your efficiency. Always look at your weakest area and try to get some advice in terms of how to close that gap, and then apply it to the next question that you do. So I'm really hoping that I will see some of you on the Elite course, but if I do not, please, we wish you the very, very best of luck with strategic case study. It's an exciting time for you because you're so close to qualification and putting your books away for a wee while, unless you decide to do another qualification. So the very, very best of luck, and do take comfort from that first point. This is a passable exam if you tackle it and prepare in the right way. So thank you so much for your time and attention and your patience this morning. If you have any ongoing questions, then you can email info@vivatuition.com. That will include anything with regard to registering for courses, course prices, etc., or what things might look like. However, now I will cover any questions that you have. So I see that there's some in the chat box, and let me bring me back. Hello. And we will go over these. So let me have a little look here. So let's go back up. So, so people waiting on results on Thursday. Holy moly. So I get nervous for you, let alone how much nerves you might have for yourself. Will there be enough time to sign up and start revising with you? Well, Thomas might have answered that, but I would say yes. Yep. So all the, as Thomas says, all the workshops are recorded anyway, because sometimes a student can't come along to a live workshop for whatever reason, or come for part of it, etc. So they're all recorded. And if you are on the Elite group, then I post those recordings right away on our little private chat. I post all of the annotations that we have had there as well. So fingers crossed, you're not going to need us, but if you do, then you can sign up for the course. This recording will be shared for all registered participants. I think you appreciate it's quite pacey. The webinars are the same, and that's why they are recorded. And then again, you can stop and start, maybe speed up the bits that you're less interested in and go back over the other ones. So that will be recorded. So great question here. Is a strategic case study the same as management case study, in that there are no calculations and sometimes common knowledge prevails? That is an excellent question. And the answer is there are very, very few calculations. I mean, most case studies, strategic case studies, you will have no calculations. Sometimes you're given some very high level numbers, and you do need to apply those where you see them, but I wouldn't even go as far as describing it as a calculation. Let me give you an example. It might give you the level of funding that they're trying to raise, and I might do a very rough and ready calculation to show how gearing might change. That's about as detailed as it goes. Sometimes I will use figures to set them in context. So if we're looking at, let's say, a contract that we need to pay out in a currency that's not ours, I might look at that as a proportion of overall costs, or I might sort of have a look at the materiality of that for currency movements, but the calculations are no more complex than that. And I love your second point in your question, Joanne, about common knowledge. That's one of the things that my students say the most. Can I say this? I've done this in work, or I've seen this before. And the answer is yes, provided it is sensible and related to Robo Bryce and Robo Bryce's industry. Common sense wins the day. And in fact, sometimes I say to students, I don't want you to overly prepare or be overly technical, because you kind of lose that initial reaction that you have in a question, which is gold dust. So one of the things that I like to say with students is when you have that gut reaction to a question or what you think the answer would be, scribble that down and don't lose that, because you don't want to go too technical and forget all of those great skills that you will have because of your exam experience and your work experience to date. So yes, hopefully that makes you feel better on that one. Yes, very, very nervous about your exam. I bet you are, but fingers crossed for everyone there. I see a couple of familiar names on this webinar, maybe hedging our bets, but hopefully won't be needed. So does anyone else have any questions? If you do sign up for either of the courses, like I said, we have a mid-course check-in and an end-of-course check-in, which have very open questioning at the end. I say, you know, we can cover everything that you need to cover there, just to give us that sort of drop-in feel. I know I am biased. I've been working with Viva for a wee while, but it is a great course. And in particular, I think the applied series, which is available to elite and the non-elite side, is really good because you're not just revising the theory in isolation. We look at exam technique and we look at application. So that's really, really worthwhile. And it gives you what it would be 12 more subtasks in addition to your mocks to practice as well. Okay. So unless there's any more questions, I will wish you a very happy weekend, and I look forward, hopefully, to seeing many of you on a course soon. But I'll stay around just in case there are any other questions for a couple more minutes. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and good luck in strategic case study. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. No problem. Nice to see you, Rachel. Bye-bye. And you made it. That's such good news. Excellent. Iris. Excellent. Hopefully we're going to see you on a course soon.